In the world of marine biology, patience isn't just a virtue, it is the fundamental law of survival. When you are trying to cultivate a living coral reef in a captive environment, you are fighting against millions of years of evolution. You are controlling the salinity, the calcium levels, and the microscopic trace elements down to the fraction of a part per million. If you rush the process, the polyps die. If you change the temperature by 2 degrees, the coral bleaches and turns into a lifeless white skeleton. A true reef grows by only a few millimeters a year. It requires a level of obsessive, quiet devotion that most people cannot even begin to comprehend. I spent my entire life learning how to keep incredibly fragile, beautiful things alive in hostile environments. I just never realized that while I was obsessively monitoring the toxicity levels in my water tanks, the toxicity levels in my own marriage were quietly reaching a lethal, catastrophic threshold. My name is Silas. I'm 36 years old, and I am a master aquascaper and marine biologist. I specialize in designing and maintaining massive, multi-million-dollar exotic aquatic ecosystems for private collectors and international aquariums. 5 years ago, I married Chloe. Chloe was a high-powered VIP events coordinator and PR director for the luxury hospitality industry. She was magnetic, fiercely ambitious, and entirely consumed by the glamorous champagne-soaked culture of high society. I was the introverted scientist who spent 12 hours a day in a humid warehouse smelling like synthetic sea salt and algae. We were complete opposites, but I thought we were building an empire together. She sold the aesthetic, and I engineered the life support. For 6 grueling years, I poured every single weekend, every holiday, and every ounce of my personal savings into my absolute magnum opus. I called it Project Abyss. It was a 5,000-gallon, self-sustaining coral reef ecosystem. But it wasn't just any coral. Through incredibly complex genetic isolation and specific nutrient dosing, I had cultivated a massive, thriving colony of bioluminescent marine life. When the overhead lights went out, the entire reef glowed with a hypnotic, pulsing neon blue and emerald green light. It was a living, breathing, biological masterpiece. It was a technological and natural holy grail that mega casinos and billionaires were spending tens of millions of dollars trying to replicate. Appraisers estimated the biological value and the proprietary filtration patents at roughly $5 million. I promised Chloe this tank was our golden ticket. I told her that when I finally perfected the stabilization matrix, we would license the technology and she would never have to hustle for a hospitality client ever again. We would be set for life. But Chloe didn't want to wait for the coral to grow. She looked at my water-stained hands and my exhausted eyes, and she decided she didn't want to share the multi-million-dollar payout with a biologist. She wanted the gold, the glory, and the spotlight. And she found a corporate shark who was more than happy to help her drain my tank. The decay of our marriage started when Chloe's PR agency landed a massive contract with a global nightclub and casino syndicate. The CEO of that syndicate was a man named Sterling. Sterling was 42 years old and the absolute poster boy for Las Vegas arrogance. He didn't build anything beautiful. He just bought flashy things to distract people while he emptied their wallets. He wore $10,000 bespoke suits, flew his private jet between Miami and Nevada, and spoke exclusively in aggressive, empty buzzwords like experiential dominance and sensory disruption. He treated brilliant working-class scientists and artists like disposable minimum-wage decorators. In my industry, guys like Sterling are considered absolute parasites. Suddenly, Chloe was spending all her time at Sterling's Glass Tower headquarters, claiming she was advising him on a massive new multi-million-dollar nightclub launch. The red flags didn't just quietly appear. They sounded like a breach alarm on a submarine. First, the profound, unapologetic disrespect. Chloe started actively belittling my life's work. "Silas, you need to wake up," she scoffed one evening, tossing her $4,000 designer handbag onto our kitchen counter. "Sterling manages a $500 million entertainment portfolio. He builds empires. You've been sitting in a damp warehouse playing with glowing fish for 6 years and haven't made a single dime. You lack corporate vision. Nobody cares about your biological accuracy. They care about the aesthetic." Second, the intense secrecy regarding her devices. Chloe changed her passcode on her laptop. She started taking phone calls in her car, sitting in the driveway with the engine running for 40 minutes before coming inside the house. Third, and by far the most terrifying, was her sudden, highly specific interest in my warehouse logistics. Chloe, a woman who absolutely loathed the smell of seawater in my studio, suddenly asked me exactly how the massive acrylic tank could be transported and if the proprietary life support computers could be operated remotely without my master passwords. When a PR director suddenly asks about the transport logistics of a $5 million highly sensitive biological asset, you don't answer the question. You run a deep-level diagnostic on the water. When you keep a $5 million living ecosystem in your warehouse, you don't rely on a simple padlock. My entire facility was routed through a custom telemetry mainframe that logged every single motion, temperature shift, and data transfer on the local network. One Saturday night, while Chloe was supposedly sleeping in the guest room because she had a migraine, my phone vibrated with a critical priority alert from the warehouse. I opened the secure app. Someone was actively attempting to execute a mass file transfer from my local filtration control server to an unauthorized external flash drive. I didn't storm down the hall and kick the door open. I simply isolated the connection, artificially slowed the transfer speed to a crawl, and mirrored her laptop screen directly to my monitor. She had her encrypted messaging app open, communicating directly with Sterling. I didn't just find an affair. I found a premeditated multi-million-dollar heist and federal environmental crime. Sterling wrote, "The VIP list for the Vegas nightclub launch is confirmed. If we debut the bioluminescent Reef as the centerpiece behind the DJ booth and claim my engineers created it, the club will instantly become the most famous venue in the world. Have you secured the life support software yet?" Chloe replied, her words dripping with a casual, horrifying cruelty that made the blood freeze in my veins. "I'm copying the master filtration files from his server right now. Tomorrow, when he goes to the Marine Biology Symposium in Monterey for 3 days, I'll hire a specialized aquatic moving crew. We drain the tank to minimum levels, load the acrylic cylinder into a climate-controlled semi-truck, and drive it straight to Nevada. We'll tell Silas the main glass fractured and the entire system died and washed down the drain. He'll be completely devastated, but he won't be able to prove a thing. We debut the Reef in Vegas, I serve him with divorce papers on Monday, and we'll be on your jet to Cabo. He's just a naive fish tank cleaner, Sterling. He won't be able to fight your corporate lawyers." Sterling responded, "You're a visionary, my love. The fish tank cleaner is going to fund our entire empire." I sat alone in the dark, staring at the glowing screen as my entire reality shattered into a million pieces. My wife of 5 years was sleeping with a corporate parasite. Together, they were actively plotting to steal my life's work, hijack my $5 million masterpiece, illegally transport it across state lines, publicly humiliate me, and leave me utterly destroyed while they became multimillionaires. They thought I was just a naive fish tank cleaner. They didn't understand the level of absolute unmitigated biological destruction a master marine biologist is capable of engineering. If you want to destroy a thief, you don't lock the vault. You leave the vault wide open, but you replace the gold with highly unstable dynamite. I didn't confront her. If I did, Sterling's army of corporate lawyers would bury me in injunctions, claim Chloe was a legal partner in my business, and tie the tank up in court for a decade until the life support failed and the coral died. I needed them to steal the tank. I needed Sterling to proudly place it in the center of his multi-million-dollar nightclub in front of his billionaire investors and let the world watch it glow. So I went to work on the biology. I took the absolute rarest, most priceless, and federally protected pieces of coral from the tank, packed them in specialized transport coolers, drove to a highly secure private marine facility, and locked them away in a holding vat. I left enough of the glowing coral in the main tank so that to the naked, untrained eyes of Chloe and Sterling, it looked absolutely flawless. Then, I turned my attention to the water chemistry. In marine biology, there is a phenomenon known as marine mucilage, or sea snot. It is a thick, gelatinous, foul-smelling organic substance produced by certain types of phytoplankton when they are highly stressed. I cultured a massive, concentrated dose of a specific dormant phytoplankton spore. I introduced it directly into the tank's automated dosing system. In a dark, quiet room, the spores were completely invisible. The water remained crystal clear. But I knew exactly what kind of environment Sterling's Las Vegas nightclub would be. I genetically conditioned the spores to react violently to two specific catalysts simultaneously: extreme, high-intensity ultraviolet UV black lights and massive concussive low-frequency acoustic vibrations, the exact kind of heavy 120 decibel bass that a nightclub DJ pumps through the floorboards. When exposed to that specific combination, the phytoplankton wouldn't just bloom, they would catastrophically hyper-reproduce. They would turn the 5,000 gallons of pristine water into a rapidly expanding, unstoppable geyser of thick, rotting, neon green biological sludge. I seeded the tank. I left the cloned filtration files on my server. The next morning, I packed my bags for the symposium in Monterey. I kissed Chloe goodbye. "Have a great trip, Silas," she smiled, handing me my coffee. "Take care of the warehouse, Chloe. You know that Reef is my masterpiece." "I'll guard it with my life," she promised. I drove away. I let her steal the bomb. Now they just had to drop the base. I didn't go to Monterey. I drove straight to the downtown offices of the most aggressive federal environmental and intellectual property litigator in the state. I handed him my original, time-stamped cultivation logs, the proprietary filtration patents, and the crystal-clear iCloud transcripts of Chloe and Sterling explicitly conspiring to commit grand larceny and transport the tank to Nevada. But the real weapon wasn't the IP theft. I sat down across from an agent from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. "Agents," I said calmly, "my wife and her accomplice are currently stealing a 5,000-gallon marine ecosystem. Inside that tank are several species of coral that are heavily protected under the Endangered Species Act and the Lacey Act. Transporting them across state lines for commercial exploitation without a federal permit is a massive, multi-count federal felony." The lead federal agent looked at the texts regarding the Vegas launch and grinned. "Mr. Last Name, this isn't just theft, this is international-level wildlife trafficking. We won't stop them on the highway. Let them install it in the nightclub. Let him charge people money to look at it. We will have undercover federal marshals in the VIP section." They were building a massive, glittering glass castle in the middle of the desert, and I had given them the biological hammer to shatter it. Saturday night, live from the Las Vegas Strip. Sterling had packed his new mega club with 3,000 elite guests, A-list celebrities, and Instagram influencers. He was live streaming the grand opening globally to pump up his syndicate's prestige. I sat in my dark hotel room watching the high-definition stream on my laptop. I took a slow sip of my coffee. Sterling grabbed a microphone in the DJ booth. The crowd roared. Behind him, the massive 5,000-gallon cylindrical tank looked breathtaking. The bioluminescence was glowing a pristine icy blue. Chloe was standing in the VIP booth right next to the tank, wearing a $5,000 dress, looking incredibly proud, waiting for her payday. "Las Vegas," Sterling announced, his voice echoing over the massive stadium speakers. "Tonight, we redefine nightlife. I present to you an aquatic masterpiece, engineered exclusively by my team. Welcome to the Abyss." The crowd went dead silent in anticipation. The resident superstar DJ raised his hands. He slammed his hand down on the deck, dropping the heaviest, most concussive bass track imaginable. At the exact same second, the club's massive array of high-intensity UV blacklights snapped on, blasting the aquarium with ultraviolet radiation. I looked at my screen. I knew the math. I knew the biology. The heavy 120 decibel acoustic shockwaves physically hit the water. The UV light penetrated the acrylic. The microscopic spores of the phytoplankton received their catalysts. The biological bomb detonated. The pristine, glowing blue water in the tank didn't just get cloudy, it violently, spectacularly mutated. Within 30 seconds, the entire 5,000-gallon cylinder turned into a boiling, churning nightmare of thick, opaque, neon green sludge. The crowd in the front row stopped dancing, pointing at the tank in confusion. Then, the biological expansion breached the limits of the filtration system. The massive protein skimmers and return pipes at the top of the open-air tank violently backed up. With a sickening, wet, rushing sound, a massive, unstoppable geyser of thick, rotting, gelatinous sea foam erupted out of the top of the aquarium. It didn't just spill, it cascaded like a volcano. Hundreds of gallons of incredibly foul-smelling, sticky green marine mucilage blasted out onto the VIP deck, raining directly onto Chloe, Sterling, and the DJ equipment. The smell hit the room instantly, a horrifying stench of rotting seaweed, raw sewage, and dead fish. The entire club gasped in sheer, unadulterated horror. The music short-circuited and died as the sludge flooded the DJ deck. Chloe was shrieking hysterically, covered head to toe in slimy green foam, her expensive dress completely ruined, wiping stinging salt water out of her eyes. Sterling froze, his jaw dropping. He stared at the bubbling, overflowing swamp in the center of his multi-million-dollar club, frantically grabbing his hair. "Shut it off! Shut the water off!" he screamed, his voice totally unhinged, watching his reputation literally rot in front of thousands of people. The A-list celebrities and influencers stampeded for the exits, gagging and covering their noses, desperate to escape the stench. The Instagram live streams captured every single agonizing, humiliating second. Before Sterling's security could even attempt to clear the VIP booth, the heavy doors of the club burst open. Dozens of federal agents from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the EPA, wearing tactical jackets, marched directly through the fleeing crowd. I took a slow, deeply satisfying sip of my coffee, smiled at the chaotic, screaming live stream, and closed my laptop. You cannot unerupt a biological swamp on live television in front of federal agents. The fallout was an absolute, unmitigated corporate massacre. Sterling was arrested right in his VIP booth, covered in green slime in front of all his aristocratic investors. He was charged with massive federal wildlife trafficking, violation of the Lacey Act, and corporate fraud. Because he had transported federally protected endangered coral across state lines for commercial exploitation, his massive nightclub was immediately seized by the government and shut down by the health department as a biohazard. His investors sued him into absolute oblivion. His empire collapsed and he was facing 10 years in federal prison. Chloe's life was vaporized. Sterling, realizing he was facing a decade behind bars, immediately blamed her. He told the FBI that she was a rogue PR manager who had supplied him with the stolen, toxic tank and forged the permits, throwing her to the wolves to save himself. She was arrested before she could even wash the slime off her skin. She called me from a federal holding cell in Nevada, sobbing so hard she was hyperventilating. Silas, please, the feds are here. The tank exploded. It smelled like death. You have to tell them you made a mistake with the filtration. Please, I'll do anything. I didn't make a mistake, Chloe, I said calmly, leaning back in my chair. I gave you exactly what you stole. You just forgot to check the acoustic resonance. I read your messages about faking the glass fracture, by the way. I hope you enjoy the smell of the federal courthouse. I hung up and blocked her number. During our divorce settlement, she had absolutely zero leverage. Because she was a federally indicted felon facing charges for conspiring to steal a $5 million marital asset and commit environmental crimes, the judge showed zero mercy. He awarded me 100% of our marital assets, the house, and my entire business. She walked away with millions in legal debt and a permanently ruined life. It's been almost 3 years since that grand opening in Vegas. A month after the arrests, the federal government legally returned the tank to me. I retrieved the real, priceless coral fragments from the holding vault. Working in absolute peace, I completely rebuilt the bioluminescent reef. It was perfect. I sold the proprietary filtration patents and the exhibit rights to a massive, legitimate international aquarium in Europe for $8 million. I paid off all my debts, bought a massive new commercial marine research facility, and I now take bespoke conservation commissions purely for the love of the ocean. I never have to answer to a corporate boss or worry about funding ever again. Last I heard, Chloe avoided prison by taking a plea deal and testifying against Sterling, but she is completely blacklisted from the hospitality and PR industries globally. She's currently working at a discount pet store, scrubbing algae out of cheap 10-gallon fish tanks for $15 an hour, knowing every single day that she held a $5 million masterpiece and willingly turned it into a swamp. Sterling is currently serving 6 years in a federal penitentiary, completely bankrupt, his Vegas empire reduced to a punchline. If there is a lesson to be learned here, it's this. A beautiful surface means absolutely nothing if the ecosystem underneath is toxic. If your partner thinks they can use you as a stepping stone, steal your genius, and leave you to rot in the warehouse while they take the applause, don't panic. Don't fight them for the tank. Smile, hand them the controls, and let them confidently put it on the biggest stage in the world. And right when they think the party is just getting started, drop the bass and watch the rot completely consume them. Thanks for listening to my story. If you enjoyed this one, drop a like, hit subscribe, and let me know in the comments, what's the most satisfying public disaster you've ever witnessed? Stay sharp, trust the science, and always check your water chemistry.